Commander Jake Harrison stood on the bridge of his battleship, watching the empty space ahead. The UES Defiance was the biggest ship in his small fleet, but it still looked tiny compared to what was coming. His hands gripped the metal rail as he stared at the stars. Behind him, Lieutenant Maria Santos worked at her station, checking all the communication channels. The sound of beeping computers filled the bridge. Chief Engineer Ryan Burke came running up from the lower decks. His face was covered with sweat and oil stains from working on the engines. He stopped next to Harrison and looked at the main screen. The radar showed 50 human ships spread out in a loose formation. They had destroyers with sleek hulls, heavy cruisers with thick armor, and small frigates for support. It was everything humanity could put together for this fight. The Kepler 442 system had been quiet for months until the Zephyrians decided they wanted it. The system had 3 planets, but only one mattered. New Eden was a farming world with green fields and clean water. About 2 million people lived there growing food for other human colonies. Dr. Patricia Wells ran the agricultural research station and had been sending worried messages for weeks about strange ships at the edge of the system. Harrison had seen the reports about Zephyrian technology. Their ships used crystal power sources that could generate massive amounts of energy. Their weapons shot pure plasma that could melt through most known materials. Their shields could stop almost any attack humans had tried before. The worst part was how big their fleet was. 300 ships against 50 human vessels was not good odds. Santos looked up from her station. Her dark eyes showed worry, but her voice stayed calm. She had been with Harrison for 3 years and knew how to stay professional even when things looked bad. The communication array was picking up something at the edge of sensor range. She adjusted the controls and the main screen flickered. Space seemed to bend and twist as something huge pushed through from hyperspace. The first Zephyrian ship appeared like a crystal cathedral floating in the darkness. Its hull was transparent in some places and glowed with internal energy. More ships followed until space was filled with an alien armada. Each ship was twice the size of human vessels, and they moved in perfect formation. The precision was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. Harrison counted them as they kept appearing. 100 ships. 200. Finally, 300 gleaming warships hung in space like deadly jewels. The biggest ship sat in the center of the formation. It was longer than 3 human cruisers put together, and its crystal spires reached out like the arms of some giant sea creature. This had to be the flagship. Harrison knew that Admiral Zektar would be on that ship. Intelligence reports said he was one of the most successful Zephyrian commanders. He had conquered 12 systems in the past 5 years without losing a single battle. Burke shook his head as he looked at the alien fleet. He had spent his whole life working with human technology, fusion reactors, kinetic weapons, steel armor plates. Everything was solid and practical. The Zephyrian ships looked like they were made of light and energy. He wondered how human bullets and missiles would work against something that seemed more like a force of nature than a machine. The communication system crackled to life. Santos quickly worked to clean up the signal. An alien face appeared on the main screen. Admiral Zektar looked almost human except for his pale blue skin and large black eyes. He wore what looked like a uniform made of the same crystal material as his ships. When he spoke, his voice had a musical quality that made it hard to take him seriously. Zektar smiled and his teeth were perfectly white. He spoke in perfect English, though his accent made some words sound strange. He said he was impressed that humans had managed to gather such a large fleet. He called it amusing that they thought their primitive weapons could challenge Zephyrian superiority. His tone was polite but condescending, like an adult talking to children who were playing war games. The alien admiral explained that Zephyrian plasma technology was centuries ahead of human kinetic weapons. He said their energy shields could stop anything humans could throw at them. He mentioned that their crystal power cores could generate enough energy to destroy entire planets if needed. Throughout his speech, he kept that same polite smile as if he was doing humanity a favor by explaining why resistance was pointless. Harrison listened to every word without changing expression. He had faced impossible odds before and survived. When Zektar offered humanity one chance to surrender and leave the system peacefully, Harrison stepped forward. He thanked the admiral for his generous offer, but politely declined. He explained that New Eden was under human protection, and they would not abandon the colonists. Zektar's smile became wider, and he actually laughed. The sound was like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. He said he found human stubbornness charming but ultimately foolish. He warned that his fleet would demonstrate the difference between primitive and advanced technology. He gave Harrison 5 minutes to reconsider before the demonstration began. As soon as the communication ended, Harrison turned to his crew. Santos was already sending orders to all ships in the fleet. Burke headed back to engineering to make sure all systems were running at maximum efficiency. The bridge crew worked quickly and quietly. Everyone knew this would probably be their last battle, but nobody talked about. "Surrender," Harrison ordered the fleet, to move into defensive positions around New Eden. The planet was a blue and green marble hanging in space behind them. From orbit, he could see the farmland and cities where millions of people lived their quiet lives. Dr. Wells was down there right now organizing evacuations and preparing emergency shelters. Those people were counting on his fleet to buy them enough time to get to safety. The Zephyrian fleet began to advance. Their formation was perfect with the flagship in the center, and smaller ships arranged in precise geometric patterns. They moved slowly as if they had all the time in the world. Harrison knew they were probably scanning his ships and analyzing human technology. They wanted to learn everything about their enemy before the real fighting started. Santos reported that all human ships were in position. The destroyers formed the front line with their speed and maneuverability. The cruisers provided heavy firepower from behind. The frigates stayed close to New Eden, ready to escort evacuation ships if needed. It was a standard defensive formation, but Harrison knew it would not be enough against such overwhelming numbers. Burke's voice came through the communication system from engineering. All weapons were loaded and ready. The kinetic cannons had solid metal projectiles that could punch through most armor. The missile tubes were filled with nuclear warheads and conventional explosives. The point defense systems were online to stop incoming plasma bolts. Everything that human technology could provide was ready for battle. Harrison looked at the countdown timer on his screen. 2 minutes until Zektar's deadline expired. He thought about all the battles humanity had fought to get this far. They had started with chemical rockets and worked their way up to fusion drives. They had gone from throwing rocks to firing projectiles at significant fractions of light speed. Every advance had come through hard work and determination. The timer reached 0 and space erupted in light. The Zephyrian flagship fired a single plasma bolt that streaked across the darkness like a miniature star. It struck the human destroyer USS Phoenix, and the ship's shields flared bright blue before failing completely. Captain Lisa Chang's voice crackled over the radio as she reported major damage to her hull and engine systems. Zektar's laughter echoed across all communication channels. He had made his point with one shot. Now he would show these primitive humans what real power looked like. The entire Zephyrian fleet began charging their weapons, space filled with the glow of contained plasma, as 300 alien ships prepared to demonstrate their superiority. The Zephyrian fleet moved forward like a wall of crystal death. Their ships stayed in perfect formation with energy weapons glowing brighter as they charged up for the attack. Admiral Zektar sat on his command throne watching the human fleet with amusement. He had fought many battles against different species, but humans were proving to be particularly entertaining in their foolish bravery. Captain Lisa Chang fought to keep the USS Phoenix operational after the demonstration attack. Her engineering crew worked frantically to repair the shield generators while damage control teams sealed hull breaches with emergency patches. The ship could still fight, but one more direct hit would probably destroy it completely. She ordered her crew to fall back behind the larger cruiser USS Guardian for protection. Harrison watched the alien advance and made his decision. He ordered the fleet to break formation and spread out across a wider area. This was not standard military doctrine, but conventional tactics would not work against such overwhelming firepower. The human ships scattered like leaves in the wind, moving to positions that confused the Zephyrian targeting computers. Lieutenant Santos coordinated the attack from her station. Her fingers flew over the controls as she linked all 50 human ships into a single targeting network. The plan was simple but dangerous. Every ship would fire at the same time at different targets. The goal was not to destroy the alien vessels, but to test their defenses and find weaknesses. The human fleet opened fire all at once. Kinetic cannons hurled solid metal projectiles at incredible speeds, while missile tubes launched nuclear warheads and conventional explosives. The space between the two fleets filled with streaking lights as hundreds of weapons raced toward their targets. It was the largest coordinated attack humanity had ever attempted. Zektar watched the primitive projectiles approaching his ships with mild interest. Zephyrian shields were designed to stop energy attacks, but kinetic weapons were so outdated that few species still used them. The first wave of human missiles struck the alien shields and exploded in brilliant flashes of light. The crystal barriers held easily, absorbing the energy from the nuclear warheads. The solid projectiles came next, moving much faster than the missiles. They struck the Zephyrian shields with tremendous force, but the energy barriers converted the kinetic impact into harmless light. A few of the alien ships rocked slightly from the impacts, but their crystal hulls remained undamaged. Zektar allowed himself a small smile of satisfaction. Chief Engineer Burke watched the attack results from his station in the Defiance's engine room. The alien shields were definitely powerful, but he noticed something interesting in the sensor data. The Zephyrian energy barriers seemed to have trouble with multiple simultaneous impacts. When several projectiles hit the same shield at once, it flickered for just a moment before stabilizing. Harrison saw the same data and immediately began forming a new plan. He ordered the fleet to implement guerrilla tactics instead of direct confrontation. The human ships used their superior maneuverability to dart between asteroids and space debris. They fired quick bursts at individual Zephyrian vessels before moving to new positions. The Zephyrians found themselves frustrated by the human tactics. Their formation flying worked well for large fleet battles, but individual ships had trouble chasing smaller, faster targets. The crystal ships were designed for overwhelming firepower, not dogfighting. When they tried to pursue human vessels, they often lost sight of their targets in the asteroid fields. Captain Daniel Foster commanded the heavy cruiser USS Resilience, and he had an idea that might help. His ship was originally designed for mining operations before being converted to military use. The industrial equipment in the cargo holds could be modified into improvised weapons. He ordered his crew to prepare the mining charges for combat use. Foster's plan was crazy, but it might work. Mining charges were designed to break apart asteroids by creating focused electromagnetic pulses. If he could get close enough to a Zephyrian ship, the charges might disrupt their crystal technology. He waited until a smaller alien vessel separated from the main formation, then moved in for the attack. The USS Resilience approached the lone Zephyrian ship while hiding behind a large asteroid. Foster's crew launched the modified mining charges, which looked like ordinary missiles to the alien sensors. The Zephyrian captain ignored them, assuming they would be stopped by his shields like all the other human weapons. The mining charges struck the alien shield and exploded in a completely different way than nuclear warheads. Instead of releasing heat and radiation, they generated powerful electromagnetic pulses. The Zephyrian energy barrier flickered and sparked as the electronic systems tried to compensate. For several seconds, the shield failed completely, leaving the crystal hull exposed. Foster immediately followed up with conventional weapons while the alien ship was vulnerable. Kinetic projectiles punched through the crystal hull, creating spiderweb cracks across the surface. The Zephyrian vessel lost power and began drifting helplessly. It was the first time in the battle that humans had actually damaged an enemy ship. Zektar watched his damaged ship with growing anger. These primitive humans were supposed to be easy targets, not clever opponents. He ordered his fleet to intensify their attacks and stop playing with their prey. The time for demonstrations was over. Now he would show the humans what Zephyrian plasma weapons could really do. The alien fleet began firing in coordinated volleys. Streams of superheated plasma crossed space like deadly rainbows. The human ships were forced to use all their speed and agility to avoid the incoming fire. Several vessels took glancing hits that overloaded their shields and caused serious damage to their hulls. Santos worked frantically to coordinate defensive maneuvers while maintaining the communication network between all human ships. The task was becoming more difficult as plasma bolts interfered with radio signals, and several vessels had damaged communication arrays. She rerouted connections through backup systems and relay ships to keep the fleet coordinated. Burke made modifications to the ship's power systems that increased shield effectiveness against energy weapons. He diverted power from non-essential systems and increased the regeneration rate of the defensive barriers. The changes helped, but the Zephyrian plasma weapons were still much more powerful than anything human shields were designed to handle. Harrison realized that conventional defensive tactics would not work for much longer. The alien firepower was simply too overwhelming for his small fleet to handle. He needed something that would change the balance of the battle. He ordered all ships to begin implementing emergency protocols that would push their systems beyond normal safety limits. The human crews began overloading their reactors and weapons systems. This was extremely dangerous because it could cause catastrophic explosions, but it also increased their combat effectiveness. Ships that had been barely scratching Zephyrian shields suddenly found their weapons penetrating the energy barriers more effectively. Captain Chang pushed the damaged USS Phoenix beyond all reasonable limits. Her engineering crew bypassed safety systems and fed raw reactor output directly into the weapon arrays. The ship began to glow with excess energy as its hull plating heated up from the massive power flow. One direct hit would destroy the vessel, but her weapons now hit with the force of much larger ships. The battle became more intense as both sides escalated their attacks. Human ships darted between Zephyrian formations like angry hornets stinging wherever they could find an opening. The alien vessels responded with concentrated firepower that turned space into a deadly light show. Neither side was winning, but the humans were proving much harder to kill than expected. Zektar's patience was running out. His fleet should have destroyed these primitive humans within minutes, but the battle had been going on for over an hour. Some of his ships were actually showing damage from the persistent human attacks. This was supposed to be a simple demonstration of superiority, not a real fight. The alien admiral decided to end this embarrassment once and for all. He ordered his entire fleet to focus their fire on the human flagship. If he could destroy Harrison's ship, the rest of the fleet would lose coordination and become easy targets. 300 plasma weapons began charging up for a massive coordinated strike. Santos detected the energy buildup and realized what was happening. She warned Harrison that the entire Zephyrian fleet was targeting the Defiance. There was no way their shields could survive that much concentrated firepower. The flagship would be vaporized in seconds when the aliens fired. Harrison prepared to give the order to scatter the fleet when something unexpected happened. Space at the edge of the system began to twist and bend as something massive pushed through from hyperspace. The energy signature was enormous, much larger than any ship in either fleet. Santos stared at her sensors in amazement as she realized what was coming. The battle had reached a critical point as the Zephyrian fleet prepared to destroy Harrison's flagship. Admiral Zektar watched the targeting displays show perfect lock on the human command ship. In moments, the primitive fleet would lose its leader, and the remaining ships would scatter like frightened animals. This embarrassing delay would finally be over. Harrison felt the weight of responsibility as 300 alien weapons targeted his ship. The UES Defiance had been his home for 5 years, and his crew trusted him to bring them through impossible situations. He would not let them down even if this was their final battle. He ordered all non-essential personnel to the emergency pods while the bridge crew remained at their stations. Chief Engineer Burke had one last desperate idea. If he could overload all the ship's power systems at once, he might be able to create an electromagnetic pulse large enough to disrupt multiple Zephyrian ships. The explosion would destroy the Defiance, but it might give the rest of the fleet a chance to escape. He began the overload sequence without telling Harrison what he was planning. Lieutenant Santos detected energy spikes throughout the ship's systems and realized what Burke was doing. She quickly sent a coded message to all other human vessels warning them to prepare for a massive EMP burst. The surviving ships began moving away from the Defiance while maintaining their attack patterns to avoid alerting the Zephyrians. The space distortion at the edge of the system grew larger and more violent. Something huge was forcing its way through hyperspace with enough energy to bend reality around it. Both human and alien sensors were having trouble getting clear readings on whatever was coming. The arrival would happen in less than 2 minutes. Captain Alex Turner commanded the heavy cruiser USS Courage, and his ship had taken serious damage from Zephyrian plasma fire. Half his crew was dead or wounded, and the hull had multiple breaches sealed with emergency patches. The engines were running on backup power and the weapon systems kept failing. But Turner refused to retreat while other ships were still fighting. Turner's ship suddenly lost main power as another plasma bolt overloaded the remaining shield generators. Emergency lighting cast red shadows across the bridge as his crew worked frantically to restore basic systems. The USS Courage was dead in space and helpless against further attacks. Turner ordered his people to abandon ship while he stayed at the helm. Zektar noticed the disabled human ship and decided to make an example of it. He ordered one of his destroyers to finish off the crippled vessel with a concentrated plasma barrage. The alien ship moved in close and began charging its main weapons. The crystal hull glowed brighter as energy built up in the firing chambers. Captain Daniel Foster saw what was happening to Turner's ship and made a split-second decision. The USS Resilience was the closest human vessel and might be able to intercept the attack. Foster ordered maximum power to engines and weapons as his ship raced toward the Zephyrian destroyer. He would ram the alien vessel if necessary to save his fellow captain. The Zephyrian destroyer fired its plasma weapons at the helpless USS Courage just as Foster's ship arrived. The USS Resilience threw itself between the two vessels, taking the full force of the alien attack. The human cruiser's shields failed instantly, and the plasma bolts tore through the hull like paper. Foster's ship began breaking apart, but the USS Courage was saved. Foster managed to launch his remaining mining charges at point-blank range before his ship was destroyed. The electromagnetic pulses struck the Zephyrian destroyer's shields and caused a cascade failure in the crystal technology. The alien vessel lost power and began drifting just like the human ship it had tried to destroy. Both captains had sacrificed their vessels, but the battle continued around them. Burke completed his overload sequence and the UES Defiance began to glow with barely contained energy. Every system on the ship was pushed far beyond safe operating limits. The hull plating started to buckle from the massive power surge and sparks flew from damaged control panels. In 30 seconds, the flagship would explode like a miniature star. Harrison realized what his chief engineer was planning and felt a mixture of pride and sorrow. Burke was willing to sacrifice himself and the ship to give the fleet a chance. But Harrison had not given up hope yet. The massive energy signature approaching the system might change everything if it arrived in time. He ordered Burke to hold the overload for as long as possible. Santos counted down the seconds until the mysterious arrival while monitoring the ship's failing systems. The Defiance was on the edge of a catastrophic explosion, but she trusted Harrison's judgment. If he thought they should wait, then she would help keep the ship together for as long as possible. Her fingers flew over the controls, rerouting power and managing system failures. The Zephyrian fleet finally finished charging their weapons and prepared to fire. Zektar gave the order and 300 plasma cannons discharged at once. The combined energy output was enough to destroy a small moon as concentrated fire raced toward the human flagship. Nothing could survive that much focused firepower. At that exact moment, space tore open and something massive burst through from hyperspace. The newcomer was easily 3 times larger than any ship in either fleet, and its hull was scarred from countless battles. Strange weapons jutted out from every surface, and the entire vessel radiated power like a sleeping giant, awakening from a long dream. The huge ship immediately deployed some kind of energy field that intercepted the Zephyrian plasma barrage. The alien weapons struck the barrier and were absorbed harmlessly. The UES Defiance was saved just seconds before certain destruction. Harrison stared at the massive vessel and felt hope returning for the first time since the battle began. Zektar's confidence evaporated as he stared at the enormous human warship. His intelligence reports had never mentioned anything like this vessel. It was larger than his own flagship and seemed to bristle with unknown weapons. The alien admiral suddenly realized that humanity might have capabilities his empire knew nothing about. The massive ship opened communication channels, and a calm female voice spoke to both fleets. Admiral Catherine Blake identified herself as the commander of the UES Titan, humanity's first mothership. She informed Zektar that his fleet had made a serious mistake by attacking human territory. Her tone was professional, but carried unmistakable authority. Blake explained that the Titan had been conducting deep space operations when they received Harrison's distress signal. The mothership had traveled through hyperspace at maximum speed to reach the battle zone. She warned Zektar that continued aggression against human colonies would result in severe consequences for the Zephyrian Empire. The Titan began deploying fighter squadrons from its massive hangar bays. Hundreds of small human ships poured out like angry wasps, each one equipped with advanced weapons designed to counter energy-based defenses. The fighters moved with coordination that impressed even the formation-flying Zephyrians. Commander Nicole Gray led the fighter squadrons in a series of lightning-fast attacks against isolated Zephyrian vessels. The small human ships were too fast and agile for the larger alien vessels to target effectively. They struck with precision weapons that seemed specifically designed to exploit weaknesses in crystal technology. Dr. Samuel Carter worked from the Titan's science station coordinating the Deployment of experimental gravitational weapons. These devices could create localized gravity wells that disrupted the precise formation flying the Zephyrian fleet depended on. Alien ships found themselves pulled out of position and unable to maintain their coordinated attacks. Commander Kevin Price managed the Titan's massive weapon systems as they came online one by one. The Mothership carried kinetic bombardment platforms capable of accelerating projectiles to incredible speeds. These weapons hit with pure physical force that Zephyrian energy shields were not designed to handle. The first kinetic strike hit a Zephyrian cruiser, and the results were devastating. The hypervelocity projectile punched completely through the crystal hull and continued into space. The alien ship broke apart in a shower of glowing fragments as its structural integrity failed. For the first time in the battle, a Zephyrian vessel had been completely destroyed. Zektar watched his ship explode and felt fear creeping into his thoughts. These humans had capabilities his empire had never encountered before. Their technology seemed primitive on the surface, but it was proving devastatingly effective against Zephyrian defenses. He began to wonder if his fleet could actually lose this battle. Burke managed to stabilize the Defiance's overloaded systems, now that the immediate threat had passed. The ship was still in danger of exploding, but he could probably keep it together long enough to join the renewed battle. He redirected the excess energy into the weapon systems, giving Harrison's flagship firepower equal to much larger vessels. Harrison coordinated his surviving ships with the Titan's forces, creating a unified battle plan. The human fleet was no longer just trying to survive. They were actually fighting to win. The arrival of the Mothership had completely changed the balance of power, and now the Zephyrians were the ones facing impossible odds. The UES Titan dominated the battlefield like a metal mountain floating in space. Admiral Catherine Blake stood on the massive ship's bridge watching as her weapon systems systematically targeted the Zephyrian fleet. The Mothership's hull showed scars from dozens of previous battles, but its firepower was undeniable. Every weapon that fired sent shockwaves through both enemy and allied vessels. Admiral Zektar stared at the human Mothership with growing alarm. His intelligence reports had completely failed to mention this vessel. The Titan was not just large, it was a mobile fortress capable of projecting power across vast distances. Its weapons seemed to combine technologies from multiple species, creating hybrid systems that defied conventional understanding. Dr. Samuel Carter coordinated the gravitational manipulation systems from his science station. The Titan could create artificial gravity wells that pulled Zephyrian ships out of their perfect formations. The alien vessels were designed for precise coordinated movements, but the constantly shifting gravitational fields made formation flying impossible. Individual ships found themselves isolated and vulnerable. Commander Kevin Price managed the kinetic bombardment platforms with deadly precision. These weapons accelerated solid projectiles to incredible speeds using magnetic fields and fusion drives. When the hypervelocity rounds struck Zephyrian shields, the energy barriers simply could not absorb that much kinetic force. The projectiles punched through crystal hulls like bullets through glass. The Titan's fighter squadrons swarmed around the larger Zephyrian vessels like angry insects. Commander Nicole Gray led her pilots in coordinated attacks that exploited every weakness in alien defenses. The small human ships carried specialized weapons designed specifically to counter crystal technology. Each fighter was essentially a flying laboratory, testing new methods of alien destruction. Gray's squadron targeted the power connections between Zephyrian weapon arrays and their crystal cores. The aliens had never considered that their energy distribution systems might be vulnerable to precise attacks. Human fighters dove in close to alien hulls and fired focused, electromagnetic pulses that severed these critical connections. The results were devastating as Zephyrian ships suddenly lost main power while their backup systems struggled to compensate. Vessels that had seemed invincible minutes before now drifted helplessly as their crews worked frantically to restore basic functions. The precise alien formations dissolved into chaos as ships lost coordination with their neighbors. Harrison coordinated the attack from his damaged flagship while Chief Engineer Burke kept the overloaded systems from exploding. The UES Defiance might be held together with emergency patches and prayer, but it was still fighting. Harrison linked his surviving ships with the Titan's battle network, creating a unified command structure that maximized their combined effectiveness. Lieutenant Santos managed communications between the original human fleet and the Titan's forces. The task was complicated by battle damage and electromagnetic interference, but she maintained connections through backup systems and relay protocols. Her work allowed the smaller human ships to coordinate with the mothership's massive firepower. Captain Lisa Chang pushed the damaged USS Phoenix back into the fight despite its crippled condition. Her engineering crew had managed to restore partial power and basic weapons. The destroyer could not take much more punishment, but Chang was determined to contribute to humanity's first major victory against alien aggression. The Titan deployed mobile construction platforms that began salvaging damaged human vessels during the battle. These automated systems could perform emergency repairs and even rebuild destroyed components using raw materials from asteroid mining. Ships that should have been lost forever were returning to combat effectiveness within hours. Sektar realized that his technological superiority was meaningless against human adaptability. The aliens had developed their crystal technology over thousands of years and considered it the pinnacle of scientific achievement. But humans seemed to find new ways to counter it with every attack. Their hybrid systems combined old and new technologies in ways that Zephyrian scientists had never considered. The alien admiral watched another of his cruisers explode under kinetic bombardment and made a difficult decision. His fleet was taking unacceptable losses against an enemy they were supposed to defeat easily. Zephyrian military doctrine did not account for this level of tactical flexibility from primitive species. He needed to withdraw and reassess the human threat. Blake detected the change in Zephyrian formation patterns and realized they were preparing to retreat. She ordered Price to target their command ship specifically. If the human fleet could capture or destroy Sektar's flagship, it would send a powerful message to the rest of the alien empire. The Titan's main guns began charging for a concentrated strike. The mothership's primary weapon was a hybrid fusion antimatter cannon that could punch through almost any known defense. The targeting system locked onto the Zephyrian flagship's command section, where Sektar was likely located. One direct hit would vaporize the alien admiral and end Zephyrian. Resistance in this system, Sektar's tactical officer detected the energy buildup and warned that the human mothership was targeting their position. The alien admiral had seconds to decide between pride and survival. His training said that commanders should die with their ships rather than accept defeat. But his pragmatic side realized that dead admirals could not warn their empire about this new human threat. The Zephyrian flagship activated emergency defensive systems and began evasive maneuvers. Crystal barriers reinforced with emergency power absorption tried to protect the command section, but the Titan's fusion antimatter cannon fired with enough force to crack small moons. The alien shields flared brilliant, white before failing completely. The energy beam struck the Zephyrian flagship's hull and carved through multiple decks before the ship's emergency systems contained the damage. Sektar's bridge was destroyed, but the alien admiral had escaped to a backup command center deep inside the vessel. His flagship was crippled but still functional enough to retreat. Dr. Carter detected massive energy signatures as the remaining Zephyrian ships prepared to enter hyperspace. The aliens were abandoning the battlefield rather than face complete destruction. This was unprecedented in recorded alien military history. Zephyrian forces had never retreated from primitive species before. Blake allowed most of the alien fleet to escape, but kept several damaged vessels from reaching hyperspace. These ships would be valuable for intelligence gathering and technology analysis. Human boarding parties led by Marine Captain Scott Williams began securing the disabled Zephyrian vessels before their crews could destroy sensitive equipment. The Titan's Marines were specially trained for boarding operations against alien vessels. They wore powered armor that could operate in any environment and carried weapons designed to penetrate crystal technology. Williams led his team through the corridors of a captured Zephyrian cruiser studying alien design and collecting intelligence data. The Zephyrian crew members they encountered seemed shocked that humans could fight effectively in close quarters combat. Alien military doctrine focused on ship-to-ship energy warfare, and they had little experience with boarding actions. The crystal weapons they carried were designed for long-range combat and proved ineffective in narrow corridors. Harrison coordinated the cleanup operations as human. Ships began rescuing survivors from destroyed vessels. Both human and alien crews had fought bravely and deserved medical attention regardless of which side they served. This approach confused the Zephyrian prisoners, who expected to be executed or enslaved according to their own military Traditions. Burke worked with the Titan's engineering teams to analyze captured Zephyrian technology. The alien crystal systems were incredibly advanced, but they had critical weaknesses that human engineers could exploit. The information gathered from this battle would help design better weapons and defenses for future conflicts. Santos established communication links with the evacuated colonists on New Eden. Dr. Patricia Wells reported that the civilian population was safe and could begin returning to their homes. The agricultural research station had suffered minor damage from debris, but the planetary infrastructure was intact. Blake opened a final communication channel to the retreating Zephyrian fleet. She informed Zektar that this system was under permanent human protection, and future aggression would face even stronger resistance. Her message was calm and professional, but carried clear warning about the consequences of continued alien expansion into human territory. As the last Zephyrian ships disappeared into hyperspace, the human fleet began damage assessment and recovery operations. They had achieved something unprecedented in galactic history. A primitive species had defeated an advanced alien empire in open battle. The implications would reshape the balance of power across multiple star systems. The battlefield fell silent except for the hum of ship engines and the crackle of cooling weapon systems. Admiral Catherine Blake stood on the Titan's bridge watching the last Zephyrian vessels disappear into hyperspace. The alien fleet that had arrived with such arrogance was now fleeing in complete disorder. It was a moment that would change the course of galactic history. Commander Jake Harrison surveyed the damage to his fleet from the bridge of the scarred UES Defiance. Half his ships were destroyed or severely damaged, but the survivors had proven something important. Humans could fight against impossible odds and emerge victorious through determination and innovation. The cost had been high, but the victory was absolute. Chief Engineer Ryan Burke finally shut down the overloaded systems that had kept the flagship fighting. Steam and sparks filled the engine room as damaged equipment cooled from the incredible strain of battle. His modifications had pushed human technology beyond all safe limits, but they had worked when it mattered most. The Defiance would need months of repairs, but it had survived. Lieutenant Maria Santos coordinated rescue operations as human ships searched for survivors among the wreckage. Both human and alien crew members received medical attention without discrimination. This approach surprised the Zephyrian prisoners who had expected execution according to their own military traditions. They began to understand that humans operated by different moral standards. Captain Lisa Chang brought the battered USS Phoenix alongside a Titan repair platform. Her destroyer had been the first ship hit in the battle and had taken punishment that should have destroyed it completely, but her crew's determination and emergency repairs had kept the vessel fighting until the very end. The Phoenix would live up to its name and rise from the ashes stronger than before. Marine Captain Scott Williams led his boarding teams through the captured Zephyrian vessels, gathering intelligence and securing alien technology. The crystal-based systems were incredibly advanced, but human engineers were already finding ways to adapt and improve the designs. Each captured component would help humanity develop better weapons and defenses for future conflicts. Dr. Samuel Carter analyzed the battle data from his science station aboard the Titan. The gravitational manipulation weapons had exceeded all performance expectations. The ability to create localized gravity wells gave human fleets tactical advantages that energy-based opponents could not counter. This technology would revolutionize space warfare throughout known space. Commander Kevin Price supervised the shutdown of the kinetic bombardment platforms after their devastating performance against Zephyrian shields. The hypervelocity projectiles had proven that pure kinetic force could overcome energy barriers that deflected conventional attacks. Alien military doctrine would have to account for this new threat in all future engagements. Admiral Zektar sat in his backup command center watching his fleet retreat in disorder. The damaged flagship limped toward the edge of the system with emergency repairs holding the hull together. His pride was shattered, but his duty required him to warn the Zephyrian Empire about this new human capability. The primitives had become dangerous. The alien admiral reviewed the battle recordings, trying to understand how his superior fleet had been defeated. Human technology seemed primitive on the surface, but their tactical flexibility was unprecedented. They combined old and new systems in ways that Zephyrian scientists had never considered. Their ability to adapt during combat made them unpredictable and dangerous opponents. Zektar realized that the Zephyrian Empire had made a critical error in underestimating human potential. The intelligence reports had focused on their primitive weapons and ignored their innovative thinking. These humans did not follow conventional military doctrine, and that made them extremely difficult to defeat. Future conflicts would require completely new strategies. Blake opened communication channels with the retreating alien fleet for final negotiations. She explained that humanity had no desire for conquest, but would defend their territory against any aggression. The Kepler 442 system was now under permanent human protection, and future violations would face even stronger resistance. The human admiral offered Zektar terms that were surprisingly generous considering his defeat. The Zephyrian survivors would be allowed to retreat without pursuit if they agreed to establish a neutral zone between human and alien territory. Prisoners would be exchanged and both sides would respect each other's boundaries in the future. Zektar accepted the terms because he had no other choice. His fleet was too damaged to continue fighting, and retreat was the only option for survival. But he was puzzled by human mercy toward defeated enemies. Zephyrian military tradition demanded total victory or death. These humans seemed to fight for practical goals rather than abstract principles of honor. Dr. Patricia Wells contacted the fleet from New Eden to report that civilian evacuations had been successful. The farming colonies had suffered minimal damage and could resume normal operations within days. The agricultural research station would need some repairs, but the planetary infrastructure was intact. 2 million colonists owed their lives to the fleet's sacrifice. Commander Nicole Gray led her fighter squadrons back to the Titan's hangar bays after their successful mission. The small human ships had proven that speed and agility could overcome superior firepower when properly coordinated. Her pilots had tested new weapons and tactics that would influence fighter, designed for generations to come. Harrison coordinated the final phases of the cleanup operation as human ships began forming up for the journey home. The battle had lasted 6 hours from first contact to final alien retreat. In that time, humanity had proven they could stand against any threat and emerge victorious through courage and innovation. Burke worked with Titan engineering teams to analyze captured Zephyrian technology and plan improvements to human systems. The crystal power sources were incredibly efficient and might be adapted for human use. The energy weapons were powerful but vulnerable to electromagnetic interference. Every piece of intelligence would help prepare for future conflicts. Santos compiled detailed battle reports for transmission to Earth Command. The engagement data would be studied by military academies and research institutions throughout human space. The tactics developed during this battle would become standard doctrine for fighting energy-based opponents. Future generations would learn from this victory. The news of victory spread quickly through human communication networks, reaching every colony and outpost within days. Humanity had faced their first major alien threat and emerged triumphant. The psychological impact was enormous as people realized they were not helpless against advanced alien civilizations. Human determination and ingenuity could overcome any challenge. Blake addressed the combined human fleet as they prepared to leave the Kepler 442 system. She praised the courage and sacrifice of every crew member who had fought against impossible odds. The victory belonged to all of humanity, not just the military forces who had pulled the trigger. Everyone from engineers to farmers had contributed to this moment. The Titan began its journey back to human space, followed by the surviving ships of Harrison's original fleet. They carried with them captured alien technology, valuable intelligence, and most importantly, proof that humanity could defend itself against any threat. The galaxy would never again underestimate the species from Earth. Zektar's retreating fleet limped toward Zephyrian space with a warning that would reshape alien thinking about human capabilities. The primitive species had weapons and tactics that could counter superior technology through innovation and adaptability. The Empire would need to reconsider its expansion plans and develop new strategies for dealing with this unexpected threat. Word of the human victory spread through alien communication networks reaching species throughout the galaxy. The news caused shock and amazement as civilizations realized that the newcomers from Earth were more dangerous than anyone had imagined. Diplomatic overtures began arriving as various empires sought to establish peaceful relations with humanity. Harrison stood on his bridge, watching the stars ahead as the human fleet headed home. The battle had cost many lives, but it had established humanity as a force to be respected throughout the galaxy. No alien empire would again make the mistake of underestimating human determination and ingenuity. The species from Earth had proven they belonged among the stars. The victory at Kepler 442 became a turning point in galactic history. Humanity had demonstrated that advanced technology could be defeated by tactical flexibility and innovative thinking. The aliens who had laughed at inferior human weapons were no longer laughing. They had learned to respect the dangerous newcomers, who refused to accept defeat and always found a way to fight back against impossible odds. As the human fleet disappeared into hyperspace, the empty battlefield served as a monument to courage and determination. The wreckage of both human and alien ships would drift, here for centuries, reminding future travelers of the day when humanity announced its arrival as a major galactic power through victory against superior numbers and technology.